if you value this content. But let's get started. And again, I very much so intended the title to be a play on things that I hope to grab your attention and interest, as well as acknowledge a recent experience in having a conversation with a girlfriend of mine who spoke to me with a British accent. And it was a play on some shared experiences that have been really intense and heavy for me spiritually. So the offense that I initially took, it subsided into an opportunity to tell a story or to share this middle ground perspective as I find myself in the metaverse of, you know, of things because of an identity crisis. So again, this is me sharing my truth and parts of my story, as well as hoping to lay a path for you to be able to more clearly see your own. So let's get started. Oh, and those beautiful beings that are the screensaver right now, those are a family of Native American Chata or Choctaw. And I chose this picture not only because that lady in the middle sitting reminds me of my great grandmother, ma'am, but it also connects me with my truth. My family work has connected me to Mississippi Choctaw. So these are kinsmen. So the story of identity in America is a complicated thing. And I have shared very transparently about the chaos and confusion that happened behind the closed doors of my home, which has led to me not being able to be who I feel I should be in this moment. And I know that's subjective, but we are in a place where, again, my circumstances and current events has this being something that I feel is of high importance. I was born and raised in Gary, Indiana, and my story is very relevant to the story that I'm going to tell because not coming from a family that had a legacy solidified before it, I've had to use my environment and the people and the experiences to shape for me my identity. And again, when the world has to teach you who you are, you can be prepared for the world to hand you an ass whooping. But very early on, there were seeds planted that if I had known the importance of, I would have nurtured a little better. One of those seeds planted came junior year of high school with a teacher by the name of Mr. Rashid, or was it Mr. Upshaw? I don't remember, but one of these teachers gave us the assignment of reading this book, They Came Before Columbus, that was written by Ivan Van Sertima. And that was my first encounter with the Olmec head that you see here, these big, beautiful, full lips and those full nostrils. That was the cover of the book that I remember. And it's not too much else. Again, being a junior in high school in a predominantly Black town, I didn't see the need to have these tools in my arsenal. So they came before Columbus to solidify it, make it quick and simple for you so you don't have to read the book, although I definitely recommend it. Many ask, they who? And depending on who you ask, you'll get different answers, but they all kind of have an origin point. One perspective comes from historians that say the Ethiopians from ancient Nubia, they migrated from Western Africa to become the seed stock of the original Native American people there, the Olmecs. Other groups of historians, still very relevant to the African Arabian perspective, they say that people from Ethiopia, who were the descendants of Ham or Cushites, migrated to America as early as 4000 BC. Both of these perspectives have historic weight, and both show that America was seeded by people from the African continent before, again, we had the Western conquest. It's also important for me to make reference to the fact that while I seem to be stuck in a position where, it's too Black or not Black enough, standing on cultural identity, I just wanted to point out the fact that Africa in and of itself is a Roman construct and concept. So again, there is really no such thing as being whitewashed inside of the whitewashed. So moving on. Again, making this very specific to me and my experience. Reading that came before Columbus in Gary Roosevelt High School. I've always been curious, and I've always been busy. And with that, and not having a lot of resources, it made me turn my eye towards the environment in a way that has kind of unpacked all of my gifts. So again, just being able to unpack and make the most of what's around me, I was very early fascinated with history. Places close to me triggered things. I used to enjoy spending time at Crown Hill Cemetery, seeing the mound in the center of the cemetery where you could see the entire city. It made me start to think of, Native American culture. Just exploring the park across the street, seeing the hills and the mounds there had me to start to look at the city, the urban area that, you wouldn't think to look for history in. It had me to start to look with different eyes. And with that same level of insight, I found so many treasures around Indiana, it was ridiculous. From 20 plus Black settlements that make you have to change your story about slavery in this country. Again, because these were freemen during the time of slavery. They'd never been in the South. They'd never been emancipated. Or again, just following the story and the connection of the mounds in Indiana and then outside of Indiana, and watching how this story grew to become something that, again, was a whole hidden history and story to be told. So with that as a framework, I'm going to share with you guys some of the research that I've done as it relates to place. As we know, people and place go together. Place for people dictates, again, the activities that they engage in, the people that they engage with, the food and resources that they consume. All of that is important. And again, all of that is disrupted when we base life on a structure that commodifies the necessities of life, the land, the air, the water. So I'll start this video, and you will get to see a part of my experience that I'll just call map study. It started very naturally with me having a map that I traveled with, and one day taking the time out to just pay attention to how interesting some of these names were. And after studying them so long, and having the opportunity to travel to some and read about others, it started to paint a picture for me. So I'll let you watch, because I'm typing in locations and descriptions that are helpful and beneficial to my story. and we'll go from there. The first one, again, is home. I started with Gary. It's the first multi-million-dollar corporation in the country, United States Corporation. That is the U.S. Steel. The next point that's going in is Crown Point, Indiana. That was the source of an interesting place I found called the Gypsy Cemetery in the 1840s. The third location that's being panned is Hebron, Indiana. And if you know, if you are religious at all, you know that Hebron is found in the Bible, but it's a Palestinian city. It means friend, and it's one of the oldest continually occupied cities in the world. In the Bible, according to the patronage, it was assigned to Caleb in the tribe of Judah. The next location, Enos, caught my interest because it was definitely a biblical sounding, and it turns out that he's the third son of Adam and Eve, the son of Seth. Morocco, Indiana. I learned of Morocco traveling. We passed a sign that referenced the historic Beaver Dam. Beaver Dam was the site of an island, and this island was said to be the home of a band of thieves, horse thieves. This connected me to, again, a nomadic group of people who were traveling through the state. Morocco historically is a region in North Africa with connections to Spain, the Berbers, and the Islamic Arabic connections in Africa. Royal Center, Indiana, don't know much about. It is one of the newer ones that I attribute to Britain. Lebanon, Indiana, again, one of those historical places. It's a Western Asian country between Syria and Israel. Heavy Armenian Islamic influence, and it was the home of the Phoenicians, who had a 7,000-year history. It was conquered by the Roman Empire before it became Christian and the Christian epicenter. Interesting to note, in Indiana, Lebanon has a West Lebanon as well. Next, Alexandria, Indiana, was interesting to note because of its namesake in Egypt. And Anderson, Indiana. It is the home of Mound State Park, and it's just about an hour north of Indianapolis, Indiana, which shows that the urban development definitely had some impact on structures that were in the area. Bless you, baby. These mounds date to Middle Woodland culture. Middle Woodland is from about 200 BC to 300 AD. Zionsville, again, is another one that's close to Indianapolis. There are actually very interesting ones that surround Indianapolis that we will, get to. in just a second. The interesting point to still note is the Crown Hill Mound. At one point, what is now 38th Street was once Maple Road, and this helps with finding those old maps to help look at the topography and the geology before heavy development. St. Leon, Indiana is interesting. My very brief research on St. Leon was that he was an Armenian saint connected heavily with the Armenian church. Again, more Arabian, Middle Eastern connections right here in Indiana. Newcastle, Indiana was one that I noted simply because it is the closest city to what was once Hagar's town. Hagar's town is not found on many new maps. But again, it's interesting that this town that's close is called Newcastle. So then you have Royalton, Indiana, followed by Her, Indiana. And this again is something to note. If you are familiar with the Rastafari movement, they talk about Haile Selassie and how his one God centered around him. So to have Her in the middle of Indiana, followed by places like Liston, Indiana, which is short for Elizabeth's town. It is very interesting if you have the eyes to see. Terre Haute is only notable because it, again, is the town that's closest to a city that no longer exists on many maps called Brazil, a Central South American reference. Mecca, Indiana, in alignment with Morocco. Montezuma, Indiana, not too far from Mecca. All of these were high traffic areas, and what again is now still areas of Black settlements. One of the settlements in this area is the Kankakee Sands Pembroke settlement, and that's where they actually still hold a Black rodeo. Interesting enough, that is in St. Anne, Illinois. St. Anne is the grandmother of Christ. And this is near Morocco. So I just wanted to show you guys how much I have learned just from studying a map in and of itself, and how, again, that insight information has connected me to parts and pieces of my story that have helped me to understand who I am, where I am, and what is happening around me. So after seeing all of those amazing places on the map, the amalgamation of places from the Middle East and North Africa with South and Central America, paired with, again, the crown, which shows an awareness from the British and the European factions of power. Let's look at some of the written references that have given insight into just exactly where we are and who the people are in these places. Mounds occur in Fountain County near Covington and to the north of Attica. And if I may pause there, and note the similarity of Attica to Africa. In fact, the whole valley of the Wabash must have been in former times the seat of a numerous population, forming as it did the greater artery of communication between the Ohio River and the lake region of the north, which would be Lake Michigan. That is excerpt from Foster's Prehistoric Races. That was in Indiana Magazine of History that I was not able to get the year of. Another quote from the Geological Survey of Indiana, 1878. Mounds are abundant in Grand, Owen, and Morgan counties. In the latter, they have furnished a great many interesting relics. Some mounds are said to have existed at one time in the city limits of Indianapolis, but they have given way to the changes required for the growth and development of the city. And again, I have mentioned how just my love of nature and interest in being out and engaged has had me to stumble on things like, the Bertha Ross Park in Crown Hill Cemetery in the Golden Hills neighborhood. Again, more telling of the fact that they are very well aware. And even if you explore this area more, it's on the confounds of the White River. They've built a lot of heavy public-private institution on those tracts of land. So if you are from Indianapolis, you can kind of follow me. If not, just kind of imagine we're going down a straight street, 38th Street, which again is the old Maple Road. It's been carved through, because there are mounds to the right that make up the cemetery and the park. And then to the left, you have the water where the art museum sits, called New Fields. You have the Interfaith Church, you have a university, you have the Crystal DeHaan's private estate that pretty much runs the rest of the way up. And again, the Light of the World Church. So if you can just imagine that area, if you're from Indianapolis, and now start to look at it in a different way without those roads, seeing the terrain, it definitely takes on a different vibe. So just to show some of the amazing treasures that we have in our backyard, these are some of the mounds that are in Indiana or are close to Indiana. The first is the Monk's Mound Complex. It's a part of the Cahokia Mound system, and that system is 2,200 acres, over 70 mounds. Again, one of the largest in the country, and it is speculated to have been one of the epicenters of a civilization that rivaled Paris and some of those places in Europe that, were noteworthy to Europeans in those times. It dates to the Mississippian age, so that means it is roughly, dates from 1000 AD to about the time of European contact. And again, it's a part of a vast structure that is right outside of East St. Louis, Missouri. Well, St. Louis is Missouri, East St. Louis is Illinois. My people are from East St. Louis. And again, this is Collinsville, Illinois. One of the things I remember with traveling, the few times that I've went back into East St. Louis, is again, it's a little hole in the wall place, kind of like Gary. They sell pig snoots, which is the nose of a pig barbecued. So again, that's some of the treasures you can get in some of these places where you have deep, deep culture. The next picture is of the Great Mound that is in the Mound State Park, again, about an hour north of Indianapolis in Anderson, Indiana. This is a amazing preservation. Again, it's a state park. Many earthenworks, many effigy, not effigy mounds, they're not animal shaped, but many circular mounds that were used to tell time and that would do alignments on the solstices. And it's also one of the parks that I had my first hyper, what's it called when you smell? I had my sense of smell sharpened for the first time visiting Mound State Park. There's a cemetery that is inside of the park. Again, a very old cemetery. And me walking and exploring that, I had the sharp smell of sulfur, and it just so happened to be at a grave of Prother. So I remembered the name, I took note of it, and after doing some research, it was amazing how it connected me into, again, my next thing to explore and unpack. Prother was huge in Freemasonry. So, that's all that to say, nothing, but again, it's a cool place to check out if you are in Indiana, Indianapolis. It's not too far away. And the final place is, again, the most hidden gem, because Indianapolis is such an urban center, you don't really get a chance to see much green space if it's not carved out for you in a park or a golf course. But Crown Hill, I speculate to have been an ancient burial mound, which is why, again, the perspective of its highest point is as it is, where you can see the whole of the surrounding city. I could imagine at one point, without the skyscrapers, being able to see at such a distance, to be able to connect with people who had other mound systems. So again, just something to show for you to, again, begin to be interested in what's around you, because there is a lot around you. So now that we've explored place, let's look a little bit more at the people. The people. What can be said about these people in this area? I have long spoke of the magic of the area, and I said it's in the water. When you get families like the Jacksons, I think Gary Chicago gives some of the world's best talent. So with that in mind, and again, not to disregard the fact that the bloodline is strong and powerful everywhere. We're all one people. But again, I've always looked at home in a different way, because I look at the fact that, when you talk about having nothing there, it's not too many places that, prepare you for that life better than Gary. And then on top of that, it's heavily polluted because of the industry that is the same industry that exploits the people. And again, this is not a model that's only in Gary. This is a model that is projected onto, certain people all over the world. So again, just to start to see what and how this structure is and has come to be. Here you have a gentleman by the name of Noble John G. Jones. He is a Freemason, and all the information that I gained for him, I gained from johngjones.org. So from the excerpt that I was able to grab, I'll read it. You can read along. The illustrious John G. Jones, a 33rd degree Mason of Chicago, Illinois, the sovereign commander of the United Supreme Council of Arabia, to be initiated into the work for power and authority, to institute temples in the United States. The application was received and accepted June 1st, 1893 in Chicago, Illinois, by Noble Raphael Pasby, Deputy of the Grand Council of Arabia. Honorable John G. Jones was conferred with a degree which gave him the patent power and authority to confer the degree of mystic shrine and to organize the Imperial Council which led to him becoming the first Grand Imperial Potentate of the Imperial Grand Council in the United States of America. Now, I don't know what all that means, but I just know he's a very important person. And because of what I know of this man, it shows that we have been operating in a position of covert, excuse me, power for a long time. And again, it is my responsibility as a redemption to myself, to my family, and to those who I have shared community with to disclose these things. Again, many people just share in place with me. All need to know this about the place that we have shared. And again, connecting back to Indiana is this gentleman, Noble Drew Ali. A fact that I did not write was that Indiana Avenue was home to, again, one of the very early Moorish science temples in America. Before the Nation of Islam would rise to power, there was Noble Drew Ali, the founder and prophet of the Moorish Science Temple of America. This was the first mass religious movement and community in the history of American Islam, and it was the model for the nation. He was born Timothy Drew on January 8th, 1886, to parents who were ex-slaves in North Carolina, but he was raised by Cherokee natives. He set up headquarters first in Chicago. He claimed to be the second prophet after Muhammad, and his esoteric spiritual philosophy was a mix of Christianity, Islamic thought and systems, and Freemasonry sources, which again was the operating system in the country. The Moorish Americans wore turbans and fezzes, and they replaced their surnames with Earl or Bey to be free of their slave names. They created their own nationality cards and called themselves olive-skinned Asiatics, descendants of Morocco instead of Negroes and colored people. Now, again, I am sharing these things just because they are very important to note and shifting from a story that has been so one-sided. I still am in a middle position with it all. And again, the middle position that I think is best addressed through the next person who has given us a great deal of insight into the identity of the American, Black, Moor, Negro, African American, whatever label that you would choose to have, again, that identity. I want to explore the Emperor Haile Selassie. He was born Tafari Makonnen, July 23rd, 1892. And he became the general in the Ethiopian army. He is noted because he traces his ancestry to Emperor Menelik II, who again can trace his lineage through his father Menelik I to King Solomon and Makeda, the Queen of Sheba. King Solomon was an Israelite. Queen Sheba would have been what they called a pagan, meaning she was earth-based in her practices and her beliefs. So again, King Solomon introduced the one God concept. Ethiopia, along with Nubia and Egypt, are some of the oldest and longest standing empires in the world. And again, a legacy that we must pay attention to when you have a country like the United States of America, one of the youngest, um, in the position to destabilize ones that have been going since we started to record civilizations. Ethiopia's history runs from 10,000 BC up until the 70s. Selassie was key in African unity by starting the African Union, and this would eventually give Gaddafi the leverage that he had when he talked about the currency. And he also began healing relationships with Europe. In 1965, he acknowledged unity with Britain, and Queen Elizabeth actually helped to restore his empire after his battles with Italy and Mussolini. We most know him for his popularity with people in Jamaica, the Rastafari. That religion was started based off of his teachings, and the Rastafari know themselves to be the ancient Israelites spoken of in the Holy Scripture. So that is the bulk of what I wanted to share with you guys in this instance. I am breaking this information down into parts, into stories to tell that I'm excited to share with you guys later. So as we rebuild in truth, I thank you guys for watching, and I wish you nothing but peace and blessings as we continue to journey towards our highest and best self and expression. Peace and love.